With the issue separation for Ab and Britt, initially as babies, we were told kind of inseparable. We went with that.
Imagine spending every single second of your life, every breath, every meal, every laugh, every quiet moment before sleep, in complete physical union with another person. Not just close. Not just nearby. Actually, physically, biologically joined. The same heartbeat echoing through a shared chest. The same floor beneath feet that belonged to two minds. For 34 years, that was the only reality Abby and Brittany Hensel had ever known. And then, in a matter of 72 extraordinary hours, everything changed. The surgery that separated them was not just a medical event. It was the redrawing of an identity. It was two women stepping, for the very first time, into bodies that were entirely their own. Bodies that felt foreign, quiet, and strangely incomplete after a lifetime of togetherness. The world had watched them grow up. The world had seen them ride bikes, graduate, teach children, and face every ordinary challenge with extraordinary grace. But nothing, not the documentaries, not the interviews, not the photographs, nothing could have prepared anyone for what came after the operating table. This is the story of life after the surgery. Not just the medical recovery, but the emotional rebuilding, the identity searching, the marriages and pregnancies and quiet personal victories that followed. This is Abby and Brittany sharing their new lives, and discovering, perhaps for the first time, who they each truly are. To understand how profound their new lives truly are, you first need to understand what they left behind. Abby and Brittany Hensel were born as dicephalous parapagus twins, a condition so rare that their case became required reading in medical schools around the world. Two heads, two brains, two spinal columns at the top, but one torso, one pelvis, one shared lower body. Two women living inside one biological framework. Their organs were arranged in a way that defied simple description. Each had her own heart, her own stomach, her own set of lungs. But below the chest, their systems merged. One liver. One set of intestines. One bladder. One reproductive system. Their nervous systems were equally complex. Each brain controlled one side of the body. Abby governed the right arm and the right leg. Brittany governed the left. Every step they took required both of them to agree, not with words, but with a kind of neurological trust that developed through years of living together inside the same skin. For decades, the medical community agreed on one thing without debate. Separation was impossible. The shared pelvis. The merged spinal nerves. The organs too deeply intertwined to safely divide. Any attempt, doctors warned, risked paralysis, catastrophic bleeding, or death. So Abby and Brittany lived. And they lived beautifully. They learned to drive a car. They became teachers. They built careers and friendships and a life that was genuinely full, despite its extraordinary constraints. But then medicine moved forward. Technology moved forward. And two women who had spent 34 years sharing a body made a decision that stunned the medical world. The operation itself was unlike anything attempted in modern surgical history at that scale of complexity. It was not a quick procedure. It was a precisely choreographed effort involving dozens of specialists, neurosurgeons, vascular surgeons, organ reconstruction teams, orthopedic experts, robotic tool operators, and artificial intelligence systems that mapped their merged nerve pathways in real time. Every movement was planned before a single incision was made. Every possible complication had a response protocol ready and waiting. The most dangerous moment came during the separation of their shared spinal region. Their two upper spinal cords gradually merged toward the pelvis, creating a nerve network that controlled legs, bladder function, and bodily stability. Surgeons had to navigate this territory millimeter by millimeter, guided by live monitoring equipment that tracked brain activity and reflex signals simultaneously. The room was described as almost completely silent except for the steady rhythm of machines and the brief, technical exchanges between team members who understood the weight of what they were doing. Then came the crisis. Partway through the procedure, Abby's heart stopped. In an operating room already managing the impossible, cardiac specialists immediately stepped in. Resuscitation began. Brittany's stability was maintained by a separate team working in parallel. The entire operation balanced on that moment, and then Abby's heartbeat returned. Work continued. The team did not allow the shock of that moment to slow their hands. When the final stages were complete, when the pelvis had been carefully restructured and the skin closed, 2 separate patients lay on 2 separate tables. Vital signs confirmed what had seemed impossible for 34 years. 2 independent bodies. 2 independent lives. Beginning. What nobody fully anticipated was how much grief would accompany the miracle. The first weeks after surgery were not triumphant. They were disorienting, painful, and deeply emotional in ways that went far beyond physical recovery. Neither Abby nor Brittany could move without help. Their muscles, reconstructed and reattached, had no memory of working alone. Their nerves, rerouted and healing, sent confused signals to limbs that had never operated independently. Breathing exercises. Sitting up. Turning ahead. Lifting a single arm. These became the entire focus of each day. Therapists and nurses remained close at all times, guiding every movement with patience and care. But the harder struggle was not physical. It was the silence. For the first time in their lives, there was space between them. Physical space. No warmth on the other side. No voice within reaching distance at all times. No constant, quiet presence that required no explanation and no words. Their brains, which had spent 3.5 decades operating in a shared framework, had to relearn what it meant to be alone inside a body. And for both of them, that relearning felt like something had been taken away. Therapists placed mirrors in their hospital rooms so that when Abby or Brittany looked up, they would see a familiar face, their own. It was a small but powerful tool. Their minds needed anchoring. Familiar sounds from their shared past were recreated in their environment. Recorded voices. Known routines. Anything that could soften the strangeness of waking up alone. 6 weeks passed before they were allowed to be in the same room again. When that moment came, it was not dramatic or celebratory in the way outsiders might have imagined. It was quiet. They looked at each other, truly looked as 2 separate people, for the first time, and they reached out and touched hands. Just that. The confirmation that both of them were still there, still present, still connected in every way that mattered beyond biology. Recovery moved slowly but consistently forward. Physical therapy became more intensive as the weeks turned to months. Walking was perhaps the most symbolic challenge of all. For their entire lives, walking had been a shared act, a negotiation between 2 nervous systems, a rhythm built through years of unconscious cooperation. Now each of them had to learn balance from scratch. Their muscles ached. Their coordination stumbled. Every step was earned. But they kept stepping. A video system connected their recovery rooms so they could see each other at any hour of the night. This simple accommodation made an enormous difference. Fear is loudest in the dark, and knowing that a familiar face was visible just across a screen helped them rest. Gradually, rest helped them heal. Healing helped them grow stronger. And strength, over those long months, began to feel like something new, individual. By the end of that first year, they walked independently across a room without assistance. Medical staff watched in silence. It was not a loud moment. It did not need to be. Everyone present understood what it represented, not just the restoration of mobility, but the emergence of 2 women who were, for the first time in their lives, learning what it felt like to carry themselves alone. Before the surgery, a significant chapter had already begun to reshape the dynamics of their shared existence. In 2021, Abby married Josh Bowling. The marriage was real, legally documented, and publicly confirmed through photographs that circulated widely. But the implications of that marriage within the unique framework of their shared life were more layered than any simple announcement could capture. Legally, the marriage belonged to Abby. Her name appeared on the certificate. The relationship was recognized as hers in the eyes of the law. But physically and practically, no aspect of Brittany's presence could be removed from the equation. Josh had not entered a conventional marriage. He had chosen a life that would always include Brittany's presence, her personality, her needs, and her voice. He understood this from the beginning. He accepted it with clarity and genuine respect for both women. For Brittany, Abby's marriage created a quiet but significant emotional shift. Throughout their entire lives, major decisions had been made together. But marriage, one of the most personal milestones a person can reach, was Abby's milestone in a way it could not equally be Brittany's. She remained present in every physical sense, but the emotional center of that milestone belonged to her sister. She handled it with grace. But grace does not mean the absence of feeling. Brittany processed those emotions privately, through therapy, through long conversations with people she trusted, and through a growing awareness that her own identity deserved space and attention. While Abby built her married life, Brittany began building something of her own. She had always been different from her sister in personality and interest. Quieter in some ways, more drawn to science and medicine, more curious about the mechanics of the human body and the rare conditions that shape human experience. She became involved in medical awareness and education efforts, working with organizations focused on conjoined twins and rare developmental conditions. She spoke at events. She collaborated with researchers. She lent her perspective, one that no textbook could provide, to conversations that affected real families facing impossible decisions. This work gave her a sense of purpose that was entirely her own. She also began expressing her individuality through smaller but meaningful choices. Clothing became one avenue. While Abby had always been drawn to bright colors, especially red, Brittany began choosing darker, quieter tones. Different designs. Her own aesthetic. For most people, picking out an outfit is an afterthought. For Brittany, it was a declaration, quiet but clear, that she was her own person with her own vision of how she wanted to present herself to the world. During this period of expanding individuality, she met Ryan. A man whose interest in science matched her own, whose curiosity about the world ran deep, and who, most importantly, saw her as an individual person rather than half of a pair. That recognition changed something in her. It made visible what had always been true but rarely acknowledged. Brittany Hensel had a story of her own, and it was worth telling. If Abby's marriage had surprised people, the news of Brittany's pregnancy stopped conversations entirely. For most of their lives, the question of whether either woman could become pregnant had been treated with medical caution and public restraint. Their shared reproductive system made the situation unlike any case most doctors had encountered. When reports began to emerge, the first response from many quarters was disbelief. Then came curiosity. Then, from the medical community, careful and serious interest. Doctors who understood their anatomy recognized immediately that this would require intensive monitoring. Blood flow, organ support, physical stress on a body that had been reconstructed, all of these factors would demand close attention throughout the pregnancy. Brittany chose to protect her privacy fiercely throughout this time. She did not offer a running commentary on her experience to a waiting public. She focused on her health, her rest, her emotional well-being, and the quiet support of her family. Abby stood beside her without hesitation. Whatever differences in experience and milestone had existed between them over the previous years dissolved in those months. They were together in the way they had always been, connected not just physically but emotionally, in a bond that no surgery could touch. The pregnancy also reignited the sisters' shared sense of purpose. They began developing plans for a foundation aimed at supporting families facing rare conjoined conditions, providing real medical information, financial assistance, and emotional resources to parents who are navigating impossible choices without a roadmap. After the surgery, after the recovery, after the marriages and the pregnancies and the personal journeys that took each of them in different directions, the question that remained was a simple one. What is the nature of the bond that holds them together now? It is not the same bond it was before. It cannot be. Before the surgery, their connection was biological, enforced, unchosen, absolute. Every moment of closeness was also a moment of necessity. They could not step away from each other. They could not choose distance. Their togetherness was not a decision. It was a condition. Now, for the first time, it is a choice. And they keep choosing it. They spend time together not because their bodies demand it but because their hearts want it. They talk every day. They share meals and memories and the particular humor that only comes from a lifetime of knowing someone completely. They understand each other's silences. They remember the same childhoods from the inside. And even as their individual lives have grown more distinct, Abby with her marriage and her teaching career, Brittany with her awareness work and her science and her own growing relationship, they remain, at their foundation, the closest thing to one another that either of them has ever known. Abby and Brittany Hensel have spent their entire lives being watched, studied, discussed, photographed, documented, and through all of it, they have maintained a dignity and a groundedness that most people in far simpler circumstances struggle to find. They never allowed the world's fascination to define them. They lived on their own terms, within constraints that would have broken most people, and they emerged from those constraints with wisdom, compassion, and an extraordinary capacity for joy. Their new lives, separate in body, united in spirit, are not a conclusion. They are a beginning. Two women, shaped by the most unusual shared experience in modern human history, now walking forward into individual futures while carrying everything they built together as the foundation beneath their feet. The surgery changed everything. And it changed nothing that truly mattered. Because what Abby and Brittany have always had, that wordless understanding, that reflexive care, that bone-deep loyalty, was never housed in a shared torso. It was never a product of biology. It was simply love. And love, it turns out, does not require surgery to survive.